Okay, so I think we are live. So, hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you are. First of all, on behalf of Power BI Philippines community, I welcome you all for joining this session with us. Today we have amazing speaker with us, Mathias. He's from Denmark, and today he is going to talk about advanced row level security with us. So first of all, I would like to welcome Matthias on this particular Power BI Philippines group event. So hi Matthias, welcome to the event, and please introduce yourself and just provide some insights that what we are going to cover in next 1 hour and what people will get from your session.
Sure thing. Yeah, so hi everyone, and thank you for having me. Let me just share my screen here. All right, so we are going to talk about complex access control design with row-level security. And the key takeaways from this will be basically you should be able to understand all the bits and pieces that makes a good security setup within an organization with Power BI. So I'm going to dig deep into some very technical stuff about security tables, how you can automate some of these setups. But I'm also going to take a step back and look at what are the prerequisites that we all need to understand for our security setup not to ramble down on us and not to fail. So I'm Mathias. I have a diverse background, trained in the Royal Danish Air Force, then later on wanted to become a product innovation developer. Did that for some time, but at some point in my career, I was handed an IT project with lots of data and lots of analytics. And from that point, I just have never looked back. I just been working exclusively with IT and BI ever since, and been enjoying the adventure so far. It's been such exciting journey. So yeah, I'm all in on business intelligence now, and I'm all in on Microsoft BI products. But my career in BI, when I look back, already started long before I took my first job. I think actually it started when I was maybe 10 years old with this tool. I think I think that goes for a lot of us, that at an early age we were exposed to the cell-based, sheet-based analytics of Excel. And I think we've all grown up to like this tool. But I think also those of us who are working more with BI now maybe don't have the same positive outlook on Excel as we used to. But I mean, it still has its uses, definitely. And I actually think the integration with Power BI this day is very powerful. But should you be in an organization where you just are having all these headaches from handling users exporting data to Excel, you should just know that you actually do have an option of disabling this feature if you'd like to. So do with this as you want. This was just a tiny little extra info. So we are not here to talk about Excel. We are here to talk about row-level security and how we can make efficient, well-working access control within the Power BI system, and how we also can do it in maybe some more complex setups than only the very basics. So we are going to go away beyond the basics and also talk about the more advanced stuff. And that's a lot for just 1 hour. So we will have to be a bit efficient with it. To help your learning and to help structure the explanation here, we're going to look at it from a case point of view. A case that I hope a lot of you would be able to relate to. And looking at this case, we're going to talk about what I think are the 5 most important building blocks for making effective security setups. And that is handling your workspaces and object permissions within those workspaces. It is understanding security groups. It is the row-level security itself. And then understanding how you can utilize security tables for making even more customized setup. And then finally, I think automation plays a big deal, because we don't want to build this big security setup only to make ourselves the bottleneck of handling this. So I think automation is a very important aspect as well. But let's get started. So the case here, we're imagining a company called AdventureWorks. I think a lot of you may be familiar with this data. It only makes it even easier to understand. So AdventureWorks, big company working in multiple regions, very global company. They have a different department, they are working in different countries, and a company like this may even have multiple companies sharing the same BI datasets. So the question is, how do we handle all these different entities with all different needs for access without ending up with 40 or 50 or 60 datasets? I think you've all seen the organizations where you have one dataset for Germany, one dataset for Canada, and not utilizing Rowlevel security, but just making hundreds and hundreds of datasets over the same data and for the same reports. That's highly inefficient, and that's something Rowlevel security can help us with. So the goal here is, how can we make one dataset that serves the entire company across different needs and permissions for access? Yes, so that's the case here. That's the problem. So we have a company here with data in lots of countries: Australia, France, Germany, UK, Canada, and the US. So you may have thought, why do I go about it in this order? Shouldn't we start with Rowlevel security? That's the main topic of today. And when I first had a project where I really needed to design Rowlevel security for a report, that is actually what I did. I started with Rowlevel security. And the problem with that is that I started designing this neat, complex, but structured Rowlevel security code that made sure that everyone was only assigned to the role that they needed, and everything was great, and I tested it in Power BI and everything was working. Then I published the dataset, and I think within a week after, I got the message that you just don't want to hear when you're doing security, and that was people saying that the dataset is completely open. I can see data from everywhere, from anywhere. I can see all the data, and I was shocked. I mean, I thought I had thoroughly tested everything, but still people were seeing more than they should be. And I went back and looked at my code and my Rowlevel security queries. There were no problem, there were no bugs. And then I realized that to make your Rowlevel security work, you also need to understand what's going on around Rowlevel security. What's going on in the workspaces and the object permissions, because those things are influencing it as well. So I'm actually guiding you on this path that I think you should go about it. I think that any security setup should start with looking into your workspaces and how you give permission to objects. So we are starting there. So for workspaces, when you look at workspaces, you may think that, but it's rather simple. It's just these groups that you could put people in and you could put objects in, and they will have some sort of access. But there's actually a lot of going on. When we look at some of our objects, our datasets and a report, you're getting permissions to use those based on these three types of permissions. There's read permission, there's build permission, and there's share permission. Read lets you look at it, build lets you build new reports, and share lets you share the access you have with others. Now there may be some intricacies of other kinds of access, like what an administrator would have. But for understanding the basics of the workspace roles, this will cover it. So there's read, build, and share. So how can you get read, build, and share? You can actually get that from the role that you have in the workspace. You can get it from being directly assign this right, this permission on the object itself. And when I talk about objects, I mean on the report itself or on the data set itself. And then there's the last part. Someone can actually go and create a link. And worst case, they create a link that gives anyone who has this link access to the object. And that just makes it impossible for anyone in the organization to track who's using this link and who's having access otherwise. So all of these options are giving access to the data set and to the report. And then you may ask, yeah, and that's fine. That's how we give access to our objects. But we're looking at Rowlevel security. We're looking at how we define access to the data within the data set. Why do we need to talk about how we get access to the data set? I'll tell you. You have these 4 roles in a workspace: viewer, contributor, member, and admin. So I don't need an answer from you, but I just want you to think about which of these do you think are being limited by Rowlevel security? Which of these would not override Rowlevel security, or did you expect any of these? And when you've thought about this, I'm going to give you an answer now. Because the truth is, and the truth kind of surprised me when I found out, there's actually only one role where Rowlevel security works for. All other roles here, it's being completely ignored. So if any of your users are admin, member, or contributor, they will just see all your data from all your data sets from your entire workspace. No Rowlevel security at all. So have that in mind. If you're working with Rowlevel security, your actual users should not be anything other than viewers. Yeah, big lesson. So what we want to do is we want to control how people get access to the data set. We want to make sure that they're only viewers of a group and that we have this controlled way of giving access, not from the roles, but from the from direct access. Because the problem is, if you just leave it up to some super user to handle your workspace, and that super user suddenly starts assigning people to become a member, because a member doesn't sound like a very senior security role. It seems like almost like a viewer or a contributor. But if people give them these roles, your Rowlevel security is in vain. It's being ignored. So you want to control that you only have viewers, and you want to control that the organization never accidentally put people in other roles, and that can be very tough. But I do actually have a suggestion, and that's rule block. That's the building block number 2, decoupled datasets. So we're going to take a step back, and now you know that anything other than viewer is in a workspace. That's a problem. And decoupled datasets, I'm going to show you, is a possible solution to this. But we're going to just step back and look at what is decoupled datasets, so you understand how you can use them. So if you look at a normal, regular way of publishing dataset, you have a dataset and a report, and those are completely interconnected. It's the same PBIX. You publish it to the workspace, and you have a dataset that's connected to a report. Now, this is good when getting started in a new Power BI adoption in a new organization. But when you move on, you start learning that it can be more efficient if we build one dataset that people can use to create multiple reports. We only have one place we need to update our data model. So that's neat, and that's something a lot of people do. What you can also do, and what not most are doing, is you can also have a dataset in Workspace A, but create reports that are published to Workspace B. So that just makes the whole thing even more dynamic. You can have central dataset, and it can be used in other workspaces, and it's still the access to the original dataset that controls if people can see the data in the report. It's neat. And you can utilize this. You can take it a step further and say, but what we want is to control the access from the data. And just like people have their own workspaces where they can have contributors and members and admins and viewers and whatever they like, but still are being limited to see only the data that they should be able to see. And we can achieve this by keeping the dataset in our workspace A and removing all the reports from there. So you have a central dataset repository. You can even add more dataset. So you have one place for your datasets. It can be governed by your IT department or your BI department. And then the users can get the access that they need. And then they can create all the reports they like in Workspace B, C, D, yeah, whatever. So it's a very neat pattern. It's great for having dynamic access to datasets. But strictly talking about security, it's really important because you can now control exactly who has access to your dataset without any workspace roles overriding this. So even if someone is an administrator in Workspace C, because they have no role in the dataset repository, they're still only having the view access to the dataset, the build access to the dataset, and only with Rowlevel security enabled, because they only have admin over this workspace, and none of that gives them access to the dataset repository. So centralized control, very important building block. There's one little thing that you need to set up to make this work. In your admin center, there is a setting called Use Datasets Across Workspaces. If you don't have this enabled, you wouldn't be able to connect a dataset from one workspace to a report in another. So that one you need to enable to make this work. But I would any day recommend almost any organization to just use this, because it gives more dynamic setups. Great. So we now know there's a problem with workspace roles, that they will override Rowlevel security. We also now know that we can actually limit this problem by having our datasets one place where we only give the IT department or BI department access to control these accesses. And we're moving on to building block number 3, which is AD security groups. And let me tell you why AD security groups are so important in modern complex security setup. Imagine that you have, in this example, just one dataset, one report, one workspace. And you have 4 people who need access to the workspace, some need access to the report, some need access to the dataset. And for each of the object, you need to go and give these people access. It can be very, very troublesome. So every time you maybe get a new team member, you need to go and give them access to a workspace. You need to give them access to a report. You need to give them access to the dataset. And I mean, in real life, we don't have one dataset, one report, and one workspace. So in real life, you would have to give them access to maybe 5 datasets and 20 reports and 1 workspace or 2 workspaces. And every time someone moves from one team to another, or someone leaves the organization, or someone joins the organization, you just need to do this all over again. And it's so many steps. Security groups can help you with this, because between the people and your objects, you can actually put a security group within them, between them. Which means now you just need to add these 4 people to the security group and give the security group access to these objects. And that's great, because when you then need to expand and have other areas, other departments, you can just add more security groups. So you could have a sales reporting security group, or you could call it security group BI sales or something like that. Give that security group access to the sales workspace, to the relevant data sets, limited to maybe a region, and the reports that would be relevant to people. And when someone enters a team, all you need to do is to add them to the security group. It's one step, and it's very easy, and it's very easy to automate. So security group, important building block for structuring and easing your workload for granting security access. Those were the three things around Rowlevel security that helped me tremendously. I mean, those were the three I started neglecting, just building a setup. And once I took that step back, learned about these three first, and actually designed those three first, designed the workspaces with decoupled access and how security groups would give access to him. It even made the code I needed to write in Rowlevel security much easier. But let's talk a bit about Rowlevel security. Rowlevel security at its principle is simple enough. It just means putting filters on your rows, and putting filters on your rows based on some roles that you assign to your users. Now, there's this thing you should know. When we start looking at multiple roles of Rowlevel security, you should know that if you give people access to two roles, they will get access to the data from both and not the intersection between the two. But I'll show you an example quickly after this. So the principle is that if you limit your Rowlevel security to, for example, sales territories here, that change will start propagating from the table that you put your filter on, and it will propagate to any subsequent tables that are connected through the data model, like you're seeing here in this very slowly moving illustration. So this is not new. This is what we're used to from any other filter within Power BI. If you filter sales territory, it's going to filter your sales fact as well. There's nothing new about this. But I just wanted to emphasize that that is just what Rowlevel security are. It is just filters working on a row context. It is just DAX that we're used to. I mean, it's almost just the DAX that we're used to. But let's get back to that. Let's have a quick demo of basic Rowlevel security. So those of you who are new to Rowlevel security, get up to speed. There you go. So this is an example report at VentureWorks. They have basic sales reporting with order quantity, sales amount, total cost, and margin. There's some visuals, and you have some slices. And you also have some slices up here. So these are the product groups, and when you dig down in the hierarchy, you get the actual products. And we have some countries we can slice by. So let's say we want to make a simple role, a role that gives people access to only the Germany data. Well, we go in Power BI and click Modeling, Manage Roles. And we start deleting something here, because this is just excessive. Yeah. There you go. So we create a new role and we call it Germany, for example. And we go to the sales territory, and now we need to write some DAX code that filters our model to our sales territory table to only Germany. Now there's a column in the sales territory called country, and we say country equals Germany. That's it. This is a Boolean expression, and for any rows of this table that are Germany, this will return true. And for any row that are not Germany, it will return false. And Rowlevel security works in the way that the Boolean expression you write here, if that returns true, it's shown to the user. If it returns false, it's not. I'll show you. So you can go and you can view Germany, and bam, the data is updated. You can only see Germany data, and you can see all the numbers here, they shrank. So now we only have a total of 3 million in sales amount. And if we looked at everything, I cannot click that one anymore. Okay. So if we look at everything, it was actually 51 million. If you're ever working with something very complex, there's actually a quick trick here for you to test your Rowlevel security initially. You can actually go to your table, create a calculated column, and put in your statement. For example here, country equals Germany. And we can call this validate RLS. Delete this one. So validate your RLS. And when we go and look at our data now, you can actually see here how for each of these countries that are not Germany, the validate RLS is giving you false, 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 false. And for that single one that is Germany, it's returning true. And that's neat because it helps you when you start building something that is slightly more complex and you want to maybe troubleshoot or debug some code of yours. So you could also do either country is Germany or group is North America. And you would see here, it's returning true for North America and true for Germany. So you could just go back, copy paste this back into your Rowlevel security script here, and it would work in this new way. You now have you now have that is showing you the North America countries and the Germany. Yeah, so that's a good trick for designing your Rowlevel security. So this was basic Rowlevel security. You could also go and say, I also want a role that gives access to only bikes. So product category, bikes. And you go to your product category here and you say category equals bikes. And now this is what I wanted to explain before. Like when I go and use the role bikes, I only get bikes. I mean, I still have now all countries, but I only look at the bikes because that was the new role. But what if I have both Germany and bikes? See, now the data is going to be wonky. Because you may have thought that this would give access to only bikes in Germany. Well, in fact, it's not. You have now access to all products from Germany. But for bikes, see, there's a massive number. For bikes, you now have access to bikes for all countries. So if you look at Canada, if you look at United Kingdom, you see we have data for bikes in all countries, even United Kingdom. But if you look at Germany, you have for everything. So this is not what we wanted. And that's what I was telling you about before. If you have multiple roles, the access is going to stack on top of each other. You're going to see the data from both roles. So if you wanted to achieve what we wanted here, you do need to put both filters within the same roles. You need to go to the same role here and say category equals bikes, and we now have a combined role called Germany bikes. And so now we have Germany bikes, and it's behaving like we wanted. We're seeing only bikes, and we're seeing only bikes from Germany. Great. So that was simple Rowlevel security. I know. It's not simple at all, but at the core of it, it's DAX. So the more you learn DAX, the more you can see how you can create the easiest, most simplest filter for your table. Then you're ready to go creating a simple Rowlevel security. Or I wouldn't call it simple. Let's call it basic. So yeah, as I said, it's all just DAX. But I also said it's all almost just DAX. Because there's actually a thing that are different in Rowlevel security from what you usually use in your DAX. And that is the difference between static and dynamic Rowlevel security. And that is the code or the DAX script, user principal name and username. Both of these will give you the exact ID of the user who's looking at your report. So whoever is logged in and looking at your report, it will show you that. I can quickly show. There you go. So I actually made here a DAX code here called user principal name, and I just drag this into this visual here, and you will see it shows me the user principal name. And currently I'm logged in on my work account, so it's actually showing me exactly what I'm logged in as. And I can use this here to show who's the person viewing the report, who they are themselves. That's not so useful, but it can be used in your DAX code as well. And even more importantly, it can be used in your Rowlevel security code. Yeah. So an example of this here. We want to do something slightly more complex, not being reliant on putting people into the Germany group or putting people into the bikes group. We want to do something more personified. We want to say we have some sales data and we have some key account managers. Actually, we would only like the key account managers to see the data that they are the key account of. So we can go to our sales table again, and we can write key account, and we can say the key account should be equal to the user who's viewing the report. So user principal name. There you go. That's all you need. With this code, you'll only be able to see the key account if that key account has the same email as yourself when you're viewing the report. So let's check if it works. Is it key accounts maybe? Let me just check the table quickly. So on the sales table, we have something called, yeah, of course. The key account is defined on the customer table. So you have a customer, and that customer, of course, has a key account here. Great. So we have here key account and customer. There's a key account, and that should be equal to the user who's viewing the report, user principal name to be exact. And I can now view this role, and bam, I see nothing. And you may have guessed why. I'm logged in with my work email, and I'm not part of AdventureWorks. So I'm not key account of anything. But I did create another user who was with the same name as me here. So MHP at AdventureWorks. So now I'm viewing this role as another user to test this. I'm viewing it as this user. And suddenly you see there's some data. It's still limited data, only 1 out of 51 million. And you can also see here my key account slicer is now limited to just me. And that would work the same for anyone else. There's also this other user. If they viewed the report, they would see a completely different version of the report with only their data. Yeah, so that's neat. And you can even do stuff like very simple. If you also have in the data, if you also have, for example, a key account manager, so the manager of this person, then you can set it up so that the manager can also see their employees, those that they're manager of's data. And if you make a path with all the change, you can even set it up so that the manager can see anyone in the hierarchy below them. I'll show you quickly. There we go. So we go to the key account, and now instead we're looking at the path. What's called manager path. I will take it from there. I actually have it here. So here's the code. So we just go to the manager path and use the function path contains. And if it contains the user principal name, meaning that if I'm part of the path for the entire hierarchy in any way, I will be able to see it. And if we do it like this, we still have that this guy was able to see just his own data, but this guy will be able to see his own data and the people just below him, but also everyone else in the hierarchy. You can see MHP here is actually able to see the data of JDO, even though there's a middle manager between them. So highly flexible. You can have these hierarchical setups, and yeah, that's very, very neat. Great. So that was for dynamic row-level security. And dynamic row-level security basically means you start incorporating the element of who's viewing the report. And if you have something in the data that can support this security structure, well, good for you, just use it. If your ERP system already have defined who have access to what data from within that system, that's fine. Just use it and we're good to go. But the problem is that most times the systems don't have this registered. You don't always have a strict who is manager of who, and that's not necessarily what gives you access to all the data. Maybe you have a head of strategy who is not manager of anyone, but needs to see all the data anyways. And there can be lots of cases. And even more so, you don't want to buy everyone a license to your ERP system just so you can put them in the access table of that system just so they can see the reporting data from your ERP system. Sometimes you just want to control who can see what data without relying on putting it into your source systems. And that is exactly what security tables are for. So security tables are just custom tables that you create yourself, maybe in cooperation with a governance entity in your organization, or it may be something that your clients build themselves, but it's just using tables with security data as part of your row-level security. So as I said, you can use those that are already defined in some sources, or you can create new ones. And it's so much of a design choice if you use one or the other. Creating new ones gives, of course, more flexibility, but it also adds more of a governance burden on you and your stakeholders. So using those that are already coming from the source, that was what similar to what we looked at before, a list of key accounts for your customers. I mean, this was source security table data. And creating new ones would give more flexible setup. So let's look more into creating our own custom security tables. So what tools can we use for this? Basically, any tool where you can put data into Power BI as a table. I mean, you could use a SQL database. That would be fine. You could have a a column for emails and column for what they get access to. You could use SharePoint list. That's a quick, dynamic way to get people started, an easy way for it to be modified by non-technical people. Also can be recommended. And you could even use Excel. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it would definitely be a quick way to get started. If you use Excel, you should consider setting it up as a proper table and not just, scrambled data. But I mean, the only limitation here is if you at the end of the day can load it into Power BI as a table. So you could use a text file, you could use JSON, you could use XML, you could use basically most formats, as long as you in turn know how to pull this data in a safe and quality manner, that can be turned into a structured table. So that is the tools. I mean, you could probably come up with hundreds of tools that could work for this. So it will depend on the organization. Some patterns for how the security table could look. It could be very simple. You could have user principal name on one column and the value you have access to here in another. So in this case, MHP has access to Germany data, and IHI would have access to both Germany and United States. You could also store it as a multi-value field. That would give you more work when importing it to Power BI, because at the end of the day, you need to transform it back to something that looks like this. But I mean, we'll allow it. That's fine. Although a bit more clumsy, if that's what works in the organization, we can use it. Can also be more complex. You can start having multiple entities defined in the same big security table. So like here, you can define both what countries people have access to in the table. You just need to have an ID here for what kind of security artifact are we controlling with this row. So here we have 4 rows that control country access and 1 that controls the year access. But we can still use this multi-type table. It simplifies how many tables you need to define your security roles. It could make it easier for business users to govern the whole thing. It's also make it slightly more complicated to use in your Power BI security groups, and probably a little less performant, but I wouldn't be too worried about it. Just use it if it fits within your use case. You can do stuff like defining roles in one table. So we assign this user to the EU role, this user to a global role, and this user to a Germany role. And then in the subsequent table, you can define what access these roles have. So EU has access to Germany and France, Germany only access to Germany, and global access to everything, and so on and so on. And we can stitch these together in Power BI and use it for our row-level security, for our dynamic row-level security, also no problem. So again, there's flexibility in how you structure the data. You just need to be able to pull it back to Power BI and put it back in a structured manner that don't break the integrity of your security. So work with your organization, work with your team members who needs to actually work with this. Talk to those that needs to do the heavy lifting of keeping this updated and governing it, and make sure that you make it easy for them. Because I think there's nothing more important than making sure that they keep this data updated if you're using custom security tables. Time for a demo using custom security tables. I'm going to go to the web. This one? Not. This one. So I chose SharePoint for this. I think SharePoint is a good trade-off between being structured and relational and being flexible and easy to govern. Now, there's a problem with SharePoint when you get loads and loads of rows. So if you have that, you should reconsider. But for this use case, for this demo, it works fine. So I've made a multi-type table here where we have security type country, and year. And I've added some access to Germany and Canada for these two respective employees. So BAM should have access now to the year 2020 and the Germany data. And MHP should have access to Germany and Canada, but for 2021. So let's check it out. Go to our Power BI. Let's go to our Power Query. And let's try to load the data. So because it's SharePoint, we're going to need the SharePoint site URL here. Go more. SharePoint list. URL to the site. And here you see the security table list. We pull that in. I'm just quickly going to check something here. Yep, so there's a spelling error in the security table. First, we're going to fix that. Great. So we have the table here. Since it's SharePoint, it's pulling in more data than we need. It has a lot of metadata as well. We need the UPN here, the title. We need the country. Oh, no, it's not called country. We need the value. And we need the security type. Those are the three we need. We can remove the others. So we can do one of two things. We can use it as it is here. We can call this employee, and we can call this value. We can call this value, and we can call this type. Great. And then we can leave it as it is and use this in our code. We could also have manipulated it more in Power Query. We could have filtered it directly here and said, I actually want a country security table. Country security table, and filter this to country. And since it's being filtered, we actually only need these two values. And we could have done the same for year. And again, we need these two values. And then we have a year security table. Either pull it in like it is here, or you could transform it into something very simple. Of course, this is so simple, so when you need to write the Rowlevel security, you can just say it's just simpler with this one. But just for the sake of this exercise, let's pull in the complex one. So we load this security table. Great. So since it's this multi-type security table, I actually recommend that you keep it disconnected from your data model and just handle it within your code. So you can go to your roles, and we can make a new role that we call dynamic or less. And now we need to do some kind of complex code. So I'm just going to cheat a bit here and copy paste it and walk you through what it means. So we have a code here that goes to the sales territory table and the country value. And it checks for any countries if this country is in this calculate table, in this security table. So we calculate a table where we take the values from security tables values. We filtered the security table to only look at those employees that are user principal name. So we filtered the security table, so I only see the rows that I have access to. And we also limited to the type, because we only need to look at those that are the country rows. And then we finally say that it should contain the value of the country of the sales territory. Let's check if it works. It doesn't. Actually, there's something odd about this. Does it work? So dynamic RLS, we're checking at as spam.av.com. And there you go. It's now being limited to Germany. We're looking at BAM, and that's because BAM only has access to Germany. So we set that up, and we actually take the next step also to set up the date here, because in the date it should be only be oh no, that's not. But that doesn't matter. It would be a similar code here. We would set it up here and say that the date and the year should be equal. Actually, this doesn't matter. I actually want to show you something that I think is more important. So you see here, it's possible to use these custom security tables and actually have them influence what is being showed within your model. So by adding this sales territory thing here, I'm now able to see if I look the data as BAM, they would see only Germany data. But if I then viewed it as this other member, they would see Canada and Germany. And that's all coming from our SharePoint list. I mean, if I manually went here and added that MHP should also have access to France or Australia, and security type here is country. I save this and I update my security table in my Power BI model. And you can see more data was added. This guy can now access Australia data. So it becomes, give people access becomes as easy as writing a line within a table. Very, very, very easy to maintain. So that was it for security tables. So you can use custom tables. There's loads of different ways that you can add them, that you can design them, that you could structure them. But once you have your security table and can load it into Power BI, you can you can just utilize them and let them control the security. And that's very neat. And some of you may be asking, isn't it a bit inefficient to have a disconnected table rather than connecting it to your data model? And to that I'd say, yeah. So maybe if you wanted to maybe look more into optimizing, you could have loaded your symbol table here instead. country security table. And instead of the complicated code, I could actually connect my country table to the sales territory table on the values here. Now, since the sales territory actually have multiple countries, it's going to be a many-to-many, and that, of course, can be a problem. For this case, it will not be. So we connect them, let this one filter this one, and now actually the dynamic country code here is very simple, because we now can go and filter our actual security table, and we can just say employee equal user principal name. So now it just needs to check it needs to just filter the security table based on who I am. So it will go to the security table and say, if I am the user, if I am the user MHP, you will actually see how this table is now filtered to only my I rows, and it's also then filtered to only these 3 countries. That will in turn cross-filter the table that is connected to the sales territory. And because of this filter, this is also now limited to, shouldn't it? Wait a minute, I forgot a setting. There you go. Okay, it needs to be single. So we need to filter from the security table to the sales territory. I forgot about that one. There you go. Single filter direction. Okay, so this one is filtered to only the rows that I, as this user, have been assigned, and that in turn will filter my sales territory table, and that in turn will filter my sales table. So at the end of the day, I only see Australia, Canada, Germany. Great. So different ways, same result. So what we could have, we also need to look at some automation, because I think actually that's a big part of the puzzle for how you can do this efficiently. I know we're running a bit short of time, so I'm going to hurry it up as much as possible. So I've created a form. You can go and do this in Microsoft Forms, for example. I think this took me 2 minutes to create this form. And what it does, it gives my users the option of choosing what do they want to see. In this case, I want to apply for access to France data, and I need to write here who gets access. In your organization, of course, you don't need this field, because you can just use the user principal ID of whoever submits the form. But since this is an imaginary user, I need to add this manually. So I send this form, and then I have a Power Automate flow here that checks when this form is submitted. It gets the details from the form. It then gets the user profile for whoever sent the form. Then it sends an approval request. This is a native feature in Microsoft. And it says the approval request, now it's statically to my actual email. But in real life, this could be dynamic. This could be the manager of whoever applies. It could be the owner of the data owner of the data that you're trying to access. It could be like the Germany manager if you applied for Germany. This can be a dynamic too. But in this case, I just send it to me statically. So that means soon I will get an email with these details asking me to approve or not approve if this account can get access to France data. And what it does, if I click yes, it adds the user to a security group. That's very neat. Then we don't need to do this manually either. They get automatic access to Workspaces. They get automatic access to datasets and reports and everything they need around this dataset. And it's adding a line to our security table. So that's all we want. We've managed to make all of the steps very simple to give people access to data. So our automation also becomes very simple. Add someone to the security group, put them in a row in our security table, and that's it. So let's go to Teams and see if I received this one yet. Yes, here it goes. You see, I received this access approval request. It's saying this guy applied. This was my user principal name. And I wanted access for this account, and I wanted access to France. And there's some history here. And I can write a comment and say, yes, go for it. And I click accept. And the rest of the flow runs. And what you will see here, if I update my SharePoint list, I don't need to do this. I'm just doing this to show you. It has added my line here. And if I go to Power BI and I again view this as this one, you will see here the countries before was Australia, Canada, Germany. But now that this automatic flow has been running, if I update my Power BI model, you can see the numbers here changes because now I also have access to France data. And that's all for today, actually. We've been through all the building blocks. I know it's been a lot. I know there's much to grasp, but I hope I have been able to show you that by simplifying every little building blocks, by making good security groups that gives access to datasets, reports, and workspaces, you can limit your workload to just one single point of entry for giving people access to some objects. Using security tables with automation behind them, you don't even need to do anything. The user can submit a form. The manager of that user can approve if they're allowed to get the access, and the workflow starts putting people in security groups and in the security tables itself. And the user would automatically get access that they apply for the next time your Power BI dataset refreshes. And you don't have to do anything. So I really hope that from this I've opened your eyes to that complex security setups are very effective, and they can be complicated, but they can also actually help you making it easier to control the whole approval, getting permissions process. So I hope I gave you some clarification, opened your eyes to some new things. I know there's a lot, but I also hope that you could see a way to use this efficiently in your organization or for your clients. So right now, I'm just open for any questions you may have, and I want to thank you for the opportunity for me speaking here today. I always enjoy sharing some of these technical topics. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I try to post regularly also new things I find and tips and tricks and everything. But for now, do anyone have any questions?
Yes, Matthew, thank you so much for this wonderful session. So let me just give you some insights about overall analytics. So more than 70 people across the globe has connected with us so far, and we have received a couple of questions from YouTube Live and LinkedIn Live. So let me just post a couple of questions in the comment section. Maybe you can go through the questions one by one. So just give me a moment. Let me just paste the questions here in the chat window. All right. So let me just start reading the question.
Yep.
The very first question here is, can we use Rowlevel security with direct query?
Say again?
With currently the Rowlevel security that you shown us, basically it is working for import mode of the data. Now let's say if anyone has direct query in their report, so how to deal with Rowlevel security in case of direct query data sources?
See, very, very, very good question. It's possible to use Rowlevel security with direct query, but as with anything direct query, there will be some limitations. Personally, I haven't actually experimented with what exactly these limitations are, but I would assume, don't shoot me for guessing wrong here. I would assume that you would face kind of the same limitations that you have with direct query. Otherwise, some functions you cannot use, some things that are limited.
Exactly. Okay. Thanks. The second question here is like for on-premise report server, can we implement the similar kind of row level security? Any idea on that particular area? That is something which is asked from YouTube Live.
Yeah, I would love to be able to give a qualified guess on this one, but to be frankly honest, I have never touched on-prem Power BI before, so I have no
Okay.
idea.
Okay. No worries, no worries. Yes. All right. And the third question is little lengthy. Let me just read it for you. So when I publish my dashboard and shared the link with colleagues, they face the loading error. When I try to resolve, I come to know I need to give the permission. Then I give the viewer permission to the report, but still the error is appearing. And loading started when I moved them to the member permission. So row level security stopped working when I provided the user as a member permission. So any guidance on how to share the same dashboard with a larger audience and what type of permission we need to assign in order to work the row level security in a proper manner?
So I'm just gonna talk back the question. So someone did not have access to the data behind the report. So they were promoted to member within the workspace, but then row level security stopped working.
Stop working, exactly.
Yeah. So my initial, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of these kind of intricacies with with permissions. So my first step here would be try to keep them in the workspace, but demote them to viewer. Because as I on my slide earlier, as I showed, there is all these three roles will actually stop row level security from working. So my first test would be try to demote them to viewer, see if that changes anything. Usually when you get the error of no permission to the data, it's usually one of two things. It's usually that you either don't have read access to the data set, or that you're not assigned to any row level security roles. So those are also things I would look into. Try to demote them to viewer, because that would automatically give them read access to the data sets within the workspace. But also look into if this user is has read access on the dataset object, and if this user is actually in any security roles. Double check that, because if they're not in any roles, even though they have read access to the dataset, they would not be able to see any data. And if they are not able to see any data, Power BI will give this error. And then when you then upgrade them to member, then they ignore row level security, so they can see the data again. So I think this could be what was going on. Maybe not part of a role in the row level security.
Thanks, Mathias. I think that helped the user to get the answer of that question. And one more thing I want to add here, Mathias. Sometime what happen here is like right now in Power BI specifically, some kind of report level permission as well. Users are providing, like they are just giving the link to open the report. So in that case as well, maybe there is a possibility that this issue occurs. So make sure that at the workspace level you provide the viewer permission, because this permission you need to provide at workspace level, not the direct access to the report. That is the one cause I think the user should check about.
There's actually, let's just quickly show here in my demo place. So there's actually two things to look at. You can check if they have at least viewer permission of the workspace, because that would automatically give access to the data sets. But as I said earlier in my presentation, if you have a central dataset repository, you actually don't need to give people viewer access to those datasets, but you still need to make sure that they have direct access to the dataset. So you can also check the dataset itself go to manage permissions here. Wrong one. Manage permission here. And then you can see here under direct access who has access to this data set. And it will show you if they have access because of a workspace role, or if they have, I mean, I could add a new user here. And this user would have read access, or you could add build access. So now they can build new reports on the data set. But to view a report that is using the data set, they just need the read access here. And you can go to the actual data set and always check who has access to this data set. And if you have some security groups, they would also be listed. And then you, of course, need to check who is member of these security groups. So at the end of the day, you should just make sure that the user is part of this access to the dataset in any way.
Okay. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Mathias, for your response on this question. And now I would like to request from Teams chat, if anyone has any question, you can unmute yourself and directly ask Mathias. I think we ask many questions to him. But still, we have few more minutes to bring up here. So if anyone has any question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. All right. Meantime, and one more thing, like Mathias is also available on his LinkedIn as well. So even if you are watching from LinkedIn live, and even after the session, if you have some questions, you can directly message him. He will be responded whenever he is available.
Yeah, and I have my LinkedIn link is also here. I'll also write it in the chat. So anyone who's having some question, maybe they don't feel comfortable asking here, or they think of later in the day, I mean, just reach out. I'll gladly try to give you a tips or a trick or two.
Absolutely. They will connect you. So I think we don't have any questions. So I believe everyone is good with the session, and Mathias, people really enjoyed the session, and we received very good feedback from the different social media handles from where we are live at this moment. And we would definitely like to have more session from you as well in the future for our upcoming events as well. So stay connected with us, and see you soon into some another sessions as well.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's been a pleasure. It's always funny here, being here in the morning, talking to you guys in the evening. And I'd be glad to come back. There's loads of other topics we could talk about. So
Absolutely. So I think we are end to wrap up the session, and for all the audience, we will be having our next meetup on next month. So stay tuned with us. And tomorrow on Sunday, we have one more event going on for Power BI. So the information is shared from all our social media handles. So stay connected with us tomorrow as well. Some cool learning point will be there tomorrow. So with this, I would like to thank once again Mathias for joining us here, and wishing you have a great day and have a happy weekend.
Yeah, you too. All of you, actually. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.